Hi again. In Apostles of Denial, Edmond Gruss is dealing this time with Russell's Bible scholarship. Another question often asked deals with Russell's scholarship. Did Charles T. Russell possess the qualifications to discredit all previous scholarship and contradict all other Bible teachers? Did he possess the ability to establish a new theology? Professor S.A. Ellis, termed a neutral observer by Marley Cole, that's Marley Cole, the witness who wrote the book on witnesses in the 50s. S.A. Ellis writes of Russell, quote, one of the noblest, grandest characters of all history. As a logician and theologian, he is doubtless without a peer today. In his research for biblical truth and harmony, he is without a parallel in this age, without a blemish in his character, with the loftiest ideals of God and the possibilities of man. He towers like a giant, unmatched. Here's another quote from Pastor Russell's sermons, and it's typical of the view held by Russell's followers. Quote, but when the history of the Church of Christ is fully written, it will be found that the place next to St. Paul will be occupied by Charles Taze Russell. That's from Pastor Russell's sermons published in 1917, just after his death by the Bible students. Rutherford speaks of Russell as, quote, the greatest Bible student of modern times. That's J.F. Rutherford, Millions Now Living Will Never Die, page 20. From these appellations bestowed upon him, along with Russell's own claims, the investigator would expect to find in Russell a real scholar, a theologian, a tower of morality and honesty, a man unjustly persecuted. What are the facts? Concerning his early training in school, J.J. Ross relates, quote, under the examination, he admitted that, at the most, he had attended school only 7 years of his life, that the public school, and that he had left, that was, by the way, that the public school, and that he had left school when he was about 14 years of age. This is from J.J. Ross's Some Facts and More Facts about the self-styled pastor Charles Taze Russell, no date. While it is certainly true that God has used the uneducated to do great works for him in fields of evangelism and the teaching of morals, etc., it will be seen from history that when God brought about a reformation or a new movement, he usually used a scholarly Luther or Wesley. The cults today show the consequences of men who have entered into the religious realm without the proper equipment. The unlearned fishermen in the day of Christ knew the Hebrew and Greek, which are absolutely essential for one to be taken as an authority on doctrine. That Russell knew neither is in court evidence. In order to cover his ignorance in court, he lied and claimed he knew the Greek. When confronted by the Greek alphabet, he was unable to read it. Brown, speaking of several cult leaders, including Russell, writes, quote, each of these religious founders was as ignorant of the dead languages as a woodpecker, and yet each has the effrontery to ask the public to believe that they have gone back to the Scriptures in their original languages, Greek and Hebrew, and have given to the world the correct interpretation of these essential passages. That's from John Edward Brown, In the Cult Kingdom, Mormonism, Eddyism, and Russellism. Although Russell was a prolific writer and certainly an ingenious man with gifts in business, he was not equipped to undertake the role he claimed. Now, Karel van Baalen in Chaos of Cults says this, it is true that a child may find the way of salvation in an emphasized Gospel of John. It is just as true that there are difficult portions in the Bible, the interpretation of which a man should no more tackle without a solid theological education than one should begin to practice medicine or law without studying what medical science or jurisprudence have found in former generations. End of quote. Russell's followers, however, credited him with being a scholar and a theologian, as well as an historian. His literary efforts were distributed only second to the Bible. None of this impressed W.T. Ellis, as he writes, Quote, I found not a blazing zealot and a fearless proponent of a peculiar school of biblical interpretation, but a shrewd old man who probably could not hold a job for a week on the average newspaper. His knowledge of human nature not only saves him, but also conceals his limitations: theological, historical, literary, geographical, social, and economic. Put in a link to how I left the Watchtower and landed softly, and I owed that to the role of scholars, almost all dead scholars in my life, because I was a collector of books. So I learned in an easy way that eludes most ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that the scholarship of Christianity over the centuries is not to be despised. In fact, the books that were written by scholars back in the days of Russell and Rutherford are still reprinted and will always be reprinted because they represent true biblical dedication and commitment and credentials, that is, the competency that goes with true scholarship. Unlike Russell and Rutherford and their successors, scholars do not take chances with the biblical data. They go with the consensus and refine it where possible, so that what we have now in the way of biblical scholarship is superior to anything that has ever existed before. I'm amazed at the staggering amount of really good material that's come forth, even since I left the Watchtower 35 years ago. So this anti-intellectual tendency of the Watchtower is something that is deeply imbued, not just in cultists, but in the American character. I would say the character of the Western world now, because of our our dubious ancestry of those who have rejected traditional religion. There's a freedom that comes from that, but there's also a potential slavery, because we never reach beyond a certain level of competence, which fools us into thinking that we are truly biblically literate, when indeed what we have reached is a plateau that we can't get beyond because we do not have the tools in our kit. And it's as simple as that. See you next time.